Hello everyone and welcome to the third video of a series about how to make a lizard in Blender. In this one we're gonna talk about UV unwrapping, UV mapping and texturing of our lizard. So, as always, I want to begin sharing with you some study material that could help you during this process. First of all, let's begin with something about UV mapping and unwrapping. And the first thing I suggest you to watch is the Blender Foundation video, UV mapping and unwrapping Blender fundamentals. The second video is by Blender Guru or Andrew Price, whatever you want to call him, Blender Beginners UV Unwrapping Tutorial. And the last video about UV mapping is 20 tips to speed up UV mapping in Blender by Zachiarias Reinhardt. You will find some interesting tips that will help you to speed up the whole process. The next thing I want to show you are some add-ons for texturing and UV mapping. The first one is Text Tools. It's free. I will leave you the link in the description of the video. And this one will help you to handle your UVs with some tools that aren't included in Blender. The second add-on I want to show you is Shot Packer. You can find it on Gumroad for only €5. It helps a lot with the UV packing. And now let's talk about something for texturing. The video I suggest you to watch to understand a bit how texture painting in Blender works. Texture Painting Quick Start by Abbit. That's gonna show you in 3 minutes how it basically works. For texturing, I can give you the same advice I gave you for sculpting. And this advice is to use as much references as you can, especially if you're working on something like a lizard that has pretty much details. In this case, I mainly used 2 images, this one and this one. And the last thing is another video by Blender Guru, how to bake perfect normals in Blender. So, now we can start with the time-lapse. Here I started to mark the seams on my lizard. And by the way, I fixed some mistakes I made in the geometry.
At night was born to find mythical, so mystical, think what you like. You could be the sword, the shield, defender of the people down below. You know I fall for love. You know I fall for love. You know I fall for love.
I tried here to mark my seams in a less visible way possible. Also here I did some mistakes. For example, the second seam on the head, I think that it wasn't necessary at all. And also this one. In fact, at the end I will join this part together.
You could be the sword, the shield, defender of the people down below. You know I fall for love.
To avoid doing the same operations on the other half of the lizard, I just deleted it, added a mirror modifier and applied it. Here I packed my maps trying to avoid the space wasting and give them kind of logic order. And at this point, the short packer will be pretty useful. I will be able to pack my maps automatically, and obviously it will be less time wasting. At this point, I forget to do something that was pretty important to have a nice texturing result, and it's going to image editor in the display section and activating the stretch option. This option helps us to see which part of our UV map is kind of stretching our textures. It comes from blue to red, and if everything is blue like here, it's okay, and you can go and start texturing your model. So when the map was ready, I decided to bake the normals from my high poly mesh to my low poly mesh. Pay attention to the shading of your meshes, because if you have activated the flat shading, you will get the flat shapes on your normal maps. Same thing is for displacement map. If your high poly texture have some displacement map on it, it will project on the normal maps too. So if you don't want it, just delete the displacement node. Here you can see that I put a texture coordinate node to coordinate the normals image, but actually it's not necessary at all, because the normal map node will use automatically the UV maps coordinate. Once I was happy with my normals, I saved them and then started with the creation of the base node for my texturing. I changed the diffuse shader with the principled shader and copied the texture node and the texture coordinate node. Then in the image texture node, opened it and selected a new texture, a reptile skin texture. You can find this kind of textures on a website called Polygon. It's by Andrew Price for Blender Guru, and there you will find a lot of fantastic textures, normals and displacement maps. They are really well done. I absolutely suggest you to try this website. Anyway, I choose a black and white texture for my lizard, added a mapping node and scaled a bit my texture. Then I added a color ramp and I set the colors that I wanted for my texture. These are the basic nodes I will use for every color of my lizard. Now I added a mix RGB and copied my base nodes to create another texture with different colors. I copied again the nodes and created a new image to use as a mask to separate the two color textures. Then I went into the texture painting mode and just started to paint over my mask using the black and white colors. Each time I wanted to add a new color on my lizard, I just copied again my base notes and created a new mask, like in this case. When you are painting your masks, pay attention to the slot you selected, because like you see in this case, I started by painting on the wrong slot, so I painted over my texture. I saw this and switched to the right slot. Most of the time, while texturing, I kept the symmetry option on, but sometimes I switched it off and corrected a bit the texture. In this way, it would have a more natural aspect, because as we all know, there is nothing perfectly symmetrical in nature.
It has come and gone. Just give me a chance, we can carry on. I made my choice. These drums of your voice, they run through my head as I remember the day. Stay in this moment.
Here I found some mistakes in the topology of the tail. I had to correct the topology and the UV maps.
Today the stars will read red. Soon blue will guide us instead. I make the stars fill the frame. They say we're lost without it. Today the stars will read red. Soon blue will guide us instead. I make the stars fill the frame. They say we're lost without it. never too late to admit when you're on. Turn a new leaf, see a new dawn. The time to decide has come and gone. Just give me a chance, we can carry on. I've made my choice, these drums of your voice, they run through my head as I remember the day. Stay in this moment.
At this point, I decided to use a black and white image to create the dots effect around the body of my lizard. I forgot to activate screencast keys, so let's stop with time-lapse for a moment and I'll show you the settings and the shortcuts I use for painting with textures. The first thing is to go to the texture section in the properties panel and switch from image texture to brush. Then click on new and go to open. Choose the texture that you want to use and switch to the texture paint mode. Now in the tool panel, go to texture, brush mapping and switch from tiled to stencil. This is the first technique I use to paint with textures. As you can see, your black and white texture is now on your screen and you can control it using shortcuts like Control right mouse clicking for rotating, Shift and right mouse clicking for scaling, and just right mouse clicking for drag the texture around. To use the second technique, go to stroke and change stroke method to anchored. Then go to texture and change brush mapping to view plane. In this way you can just click and drag and your texture will appear on the mesh. Now we can come back to the time lapse. In this case, as you will see, I used the first technique for my texturing, but you can choose the technique that you prefer, basing on what you need. Here I decided to create some parts with a bigger scale. So I copied one of the base texture parts and changed the texture coordinate option from UV to generated, and then I changed the mapping options. I also changed the image projection option from flat to box. Here I noticed that the UV seams position on the head was causing me some problems, so I decided to fix them by hand to avoid losing the position of the UVs I already had. create the displacement effect, I copied one small scaled nodes group and one big scaled nodes group with black and white color ramp instead of the colored color ramp. I mixed them using the mask I created to mix the colored versions, increased or decreased the intensity of the displacement effect by changing the color ramp values. I used exactly the same system for the reflection map and the roughness map. Now we can say that texturing is done, and we are at the end of this video. This one is supposed to be the last video about the lizard, but if you're interested, I can consider to do one more where I'll show you the rigging and the texture baking process. Just let me know in a comment below the video. Also leave a comment if you have any suggestions about improving this process. You will find all the links to the supplies mentioned in this video in the description section, and if you're interested, you will be able to buy my textured, rigged and retopologized lizard on websites like CG Trader, Blender Market, TurboSquid and so on. So thank you for watching and see you in my next video. Bye bye!